What happens when your worst fear becomes your reality? Hi, I'm Brent Cassity. Welcome to the Nightmare Success In-N-Out podcast, where we explore how to overcome your fears and nightmares and set yourself free. We're going to be exploring this topic with guys I was in Leavenworth with and others who survived their own nightmare. These stories can be inspiring, sometimes sad. There's some humor, but hopefully you can come away with a nugget of something that'll help you knock down some of the prisons you built up in your own mind. All right. Welcome back, Nightmare Success In-N-Out listeners. This is where you come for what happens when your worst fear becomes your reality. How do you adapt, survive, overcome, set yourself free? Folks, don't forget to follow, subscribe, share this thing out, like it up. It helps the show, comment. So who are we talking to today? Well, I'm talking to Tyler Foster, and I think this was, for me, I thought it would be interesting to talk to somebody who is 22 years old, had this happen, his nightmare happened to him as a teenager, and he's now in law school. And I thought it'd be just interesting to see a lot of people I interview from the 70s and the 60s and 50s and 40s and 30s. I thought it'd be interesting to see what life is like as a 22-year-old being a justice impacted person, and how is he perceived by his school lawmates and everybody else that's around him. It's give you a little bit of background on Tyler. He writes, "My first time in a courtroom was as a criminal defendant. As a teenager, I was arrested and subsequently incarcerated for several months behind bars. I witnessed the stark realities of the criminal legal system, including the criminalization of poverty, the inhumane conditions of confinement, and the lack of access to the mental health and substance use treatment." And one of the things that Tyler did while he was in, he became a jailhouse lawyer, helping and assisting people with their cases, advocating for better conditions in the jail and prison he was in. And so this ignited a passion for him for criminal legal reform. And so he's currently attending the University of Memphis Law School on a full tuition scholarship. He plans to pursue a career in the criminal legal reform. I thought something was really interesting I hadn't heard before was he's currently serves on the board of directors for the formerly incarcerated college graduates network, which I didn't even know that existed. So, and the other thing is he graduated 2 years early at the University of Memphis, and he was earned a BA and summa cum laude graduate with good grades. So he didn't waste any time with his opportunities. Can't wait to jump into all that. Before we do, I want to recognize our show sponsor, Auto Plaza Direct. Who likes spending a couple of weekends walking car lots looking for a car? Then you spend 4 or 5 hours in the dealership to buy a car. It's kind of like a root canal appointment. Well, there's a better way to take away all that pain and hassle getting a car. It's called Auto Plaza Direct. They're your personal car concierge. Just tell them the car you want, what you can pay, and they'll go find that car for you. They'll negotiate your best price. They also offer you warranties and finance, all full service. Go to autoplazadirect.com to get started with your personal car concierge, the new hassle-free way, the car buying experience you deserve. Tell them Brent from Nightmare Success sent you, Auto Plaza Direct. Welcome in, Tyler Foster. How are you?
I'm doing good. How are you doing?
I'm doing good. So you're on spring break. So what does a guy do on spring break that's in law school? Is it truly spring break, or you still got all that stuff in your head of law school and what's next and what's going on, or are you really taking a break?
So unfortunately, the grind continues. I have been participating in what's called alternative spring break. So each year, my law school puts together a series of different clinics in partnership with local nonprofits and practicing attorneys. And so we provide legal assistance to low-income individuals in the Memphis area. So right now I'm working with the expungement clinic. So we're working on expungements for people who have a criminal record and trying to get the records cleaned, which will help them with employment, education, housing. So that's what I'm doing. There's also some other clinics. There's immigration. There's fair housing. There's wills. So there's a pretty good variety.
I love it.
I'm actually one of the on the executive board of the Public Action Law Society, which is the student-run organization that organizes alternative spring break. So I've been pretty busy both participating in the clinic and also helping to oversee and manage the spring break.
That sounds like a lot on spring break. But I'm so glad and happy to hear that someone is because in the state level stuff, expungements have become something that people can do, and it makes a huge difference in how they get to go forward with their opportunities in life after they get out of prison. So it's good work, and it truly impacts people's lives. You know, Tyler, going back before this whole nightmare happened for you, what was like life for you growing up as a kid?
So I think I had a relatively normal childhood for the most part. There were certainly some difficulties along the way. I was raised by a single mother. We experienced poverty for a time and were even homeless for a short period. Um,
How old would you have been when you were homeless?
it would have been when I was about 8 or 9. Um, there were, about several months where our housing situation was definitely challenging, and we were kind of moving around to different places just to get by. But one thing I will say is that my mom was super supportive of me growing up. She was very encouraging of me and my brother to pursue education, to stay out of trouble, work hard, and take care of your responsibilities. Um, and for a while, I was able to do that. Eventually, I did end up coming entangled with the criminal legal system. And then that was a very interesting experience, something that really opened my eyes to some of the problems with the criminal legal system, and really helped me turn my life around and get my life back on track.
Well, let's talk about that a little bit because I can't imagine at 8 or 9 years old worrying about where you were living and not having somewhere to live. Did you guys talk about that as a family, or was it just one of those things you just did as a family and it was more of just surviving, gritting it out and moving forward? Or did you guys sit around and say, gosh, what are we going to do tomorrow or the next day or the next day?
I think I don't recall ever really talking about it. I think it was just kind of something that um, we just had to get through. Um, we had never really been ones to complain or loathe and self pity about situations. The way I was raised is you keep going, you work hard, um, do what you need to do to get by, basically. So I don't recall us ever talking about it more. It was more so just something that we had to do, and then we were eventually able to get back on our feet. My mom got a good job. We were able to move into our own house, which was nice, but there was that little period that was definitely um, pretty
Yeah,
difficult.
I would think that would have an impact on you, just on how you see the world. Was school for you? I mean, you obviously are very smart. Was school for you something that you enjoyed as a kid and as a teenager and in high school?
So I wouldn't say that I enjoyed it. I think that I was fortunate. I think it did come naturally to me, so I didn't uh, really have to put in a lot of effort studying. Certainly, when I got to the around middle school, um, I was still maintaining good grades, but I did start hanging with the wrong crowd and getting into a little bit of trouble, um, and had to deal with the consequences of that for a while. I was fortunate for high school. I was able to get into a Catholic high school in Chattanooga, which I got in on financial aid. Um, and it was really a good opportunity to be around positive influences, people who um, cared a lot about school and were very involved in very community groups and nonprofit or volunteer work.
Hmm.
Um, so that was really something that I think helped a lot to kind of create a path that I was eventually able to get back to in terms of being successful and being able to overcome my obstacles.
So how does a guy like Tyler Foster end up being in how do you end up getting into the system?
Yeah, so one thing that I've come to learn is that it can happen to anyone in just a split second. In my case, I made a split second decision um, in a high pressure, adrenaline filled situation. At the time, I thought I had made the right decision. Um, Looking back, I could have handled it differently. So I take responsibility for my actions. And I ended up taking the plea deal, pleading no contest, and serving my sentence. I think that all goes to show that just it's those split second decisions that a lot of people make that land them behind bars and in the criminal legal system. So I think that there are various contributing factors to those types of decisions. And I think that just given my background, the way I grew up, and the fact that I had friends and family members who had been incarcerated, and there was a certain way that I responded to situations, especially when I was challenged or felt threatened, certain ways that I responded to it that were not conducive to avoiding trouble, staying out of the criminal legal system. So that's something that since then I've worked hard to prioritize de-escalation strategies, conflict avoidance, just to make sure that I don't make the same mistakes again in the future.
Well, you've raised the curiosity of the audience. What happened?
So it was a split-second decision. I got into a confrontation with another individual, and I felt that I was in fear for my safety, and I ended up shooting him a couple times. I think our argument was then it was self-defense. And looking back, I think there was a self-defense component, but I also think that there was a component of just being young and maybe a little bit hot-headed, that I could have avoided the confrontation, and maybe if I had taken other steps, but unfortunately I made the choice that I did, and I had to account for my actions.
And I guess when you talk about what happened, it was the categorized as road rage, so it had something to do with the driving. And I mean, you hear about it a lot. I mean, people getting very upset. Somebody cuts them off or whatever the case is, and then it's those split second things. What were your thoughts, Tyler, when this happened? I mean, I'm sure the adrenaline was running high. Did you think were you worried that possibly this person was fatally shot?
So it happened so fast that there wasn't really any time to reflect on it. I don't even hardly remember the aftermath. I just remember what led up to the confrontation, and then sitting in an interrogation room at the police station, recounting the series of events. So I don't think that there was any really conscious thought between that time, at least not that I can recall.
So you get into this room, and how old are you?
I was 19.
19 years old. You get into this room, and they start interrogating you. Are you thinking you need an attorney? Are you just in a daze and just answering questions? Like, how does that process work for a 19-year-old?
Yeah. So back then,
your parents, like, what happened?
Right. So I had no prior involvement with the adult criminal legal system. So I didn't know what the Fifth Amendment was, what that is the amendment that entitles you to remain silent, or the Sixth Amendment that entitles you to counsel. So I didn't know any of that. I think that they probably did read me my Miranda rights. But when you're in that type of situation, you're in a very small, maybe 8 by 8 foot room with a experienced detective. You're in handcuffs. They've got the heat turned on, figuratively and literally, to really make you sweat. You don't really think about what your rights are, what you should be doing in terms of, putting yourself in the best position to succeed at trial. Your thought is that you need to
be helpful.
You want to go home. Yeah, you want to be helpful, provide them the information that they are looking for. So I cooperated fully. I told them exactly what I could recall, and was fully cooperated with them, and just let them know that I was trying to help them however I could. When looking back, some of the stuff that I said, even if it was innocuous, they have a way of twisting it in their reports and at trial, and then you get locked into a story. So if your story even deviates a little bit later on, for example, at trial, after you've had a chance to reflect and hear some of the other evidence and reconcile some of the inconsistencies, because whenever you're in that type of situation, your brain, you're going to be thinking, you're not going to be thinking logically. You're going to be kind of thinking, it's the fight or flight response, I would say.
Sure.
So you're going to be having little bits and pieces, and there's going to be inconsistencies in your recollection. And then when you hear from other witnesses you see the evidence that they gather, then you can kind of reconcile those inconsistencies. But at that point, it's too late because you've already given your statement. So anything that you say then is different, even if it's the truth, they can take it to, twist it to say that you're lying.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the biggest things out of, it's the fourth season of this show, and the consistency of what your statement is that they're professionals and you're somebody that's in an emotional state, and you need an attorney there to represent you, to know all the things that you said you didn't know. You don't know the Fifth Amendment, you don't know the Sixth Amendment, you don't know all those different pieces that, whether you're innocent or guilty, you still need those things, because you could be targeted as an innocent person to make a narrative, to make a case for someone when they should be out looking for someone else. So that's a real key to people knowing that regardless of the situation, if you intertwine yourself with the legal system, you need representation, because you are not the professionals that they are. So it needs to be balanced. So do they let you go, Tyler? Do you bond out? How does this work with this type of situation?
Yeah. So just to follow up on your point, one of my favorite quotes from a defense attorney was that guilty people need attorneys, innocent people definitely need attorneys. And that just goes to show you that a lot of times people who actually are innocent haven't had that prior involvement with the criminal legal system, and therefore aren't as well equipped to deal with that type of interrogation tactics. So that was just one thing I wanted to point out. So then to answer your question, so I ended up, after the interrogation, I ended up getting arrested and charged with 2 felony offenses. I got taken to the jail. I don't recall the exact amount of time. It was a few days in jail. I went to court, had my bail set. At this point, I remember meeting with an attorney from the public defender's office, and just talking about the case and how kind of giving my account of what had happened. So I eventually did get bail set. So I was able to post that bail and then get out, and I was released while my case was pending.
So were they offering you plea bargains, or were you always just accepting that you were going to go to trial?
So I had talked to my attorney, and we believed that there was a pretty good chance that the case was going to go to trial, just based on the serious nature of the charges and my attorney's conversations with the prosecutor. Mm-hmm. They did make an offer to, I believe it was attempted second-degree assault with a sentencing range of 0 to 20 years open sentencing. So we would have a hearing before the judge, and the judge would impose the sentence. I never thought for a second about accepting that offer. I knew that would have made me a convicted felon. I would have most likely had to serve some prison time, because the judge that we were in front of was known for being very stringy with probation and very heavy-handed with sentences. Mm-hmm. So it wasn't really something that we ever thought about accepting. So from pretty much the very beginning, our mindset was, we're going to go to trial. We need to prepare for trial and present the strongest case possible to the jury.
So what happened?
So we ended up going to trial. The trial began on a Monday. We had our jury selection. We had a very good jury assembled. Then on the second day, then the latter part of the first day, we heard from witnesses. Then on the second day, we got to the final witness from the prosecution, the final witness before they rested their case in chief. And then it was the alleged victim, the individual who I had shot, was the one who was testifying. And I remember he just got very upset while testifying, very combative, started making incendiary remarks to kind of inflame the jury. And it was something that we had to actually take a recess to discuss how to proceed. And with the advice of my attorney, we agreed that we were going to ask the court to declare a mistrial, just because of how he had presented to the jury. Mm-hmm. Stuff he was saying could have, prejudiced the jury. So we ended up asking the judge, requesting that the judge declare a mistrial, and the judge agreed with our motion. The judge agreed that his conduct had been out of line and that the jury could have possibly been prejudiced. So we had a mistrial declared.
Wow. I didn't know that part of the story. So what happened next?
So I was very disappointed at the time. I just wanted the case to be over with. I my hope was we were going to go to trial and we were going to get a not guilty verdict. So after the mistrial, we had the case reset for trial. It was going to be a few more months before we could go back and have the trial again. So I ended up just planning to, recharge those few months, do whatever I need to stay out of trouble, make sure that I'm assisting with my case however I can, staying in communication with my attorney. But then the following day, after we had gotten it reset for a new trial, I get a call from my attorney saying that the prosecution is wanting to offer a plea agreement. And so I just hear plea agreement. I'm thinking, no, I'm not going to accept a plea agreement. I want to have a trial. Let the jury decide. And so then my attorney goes on to say, well, they're offering a misdemeanor assault. They'll drop the firearms charge and reduce the felony assault to a misdemeanor assault. 1 year maximum jail time. You'll go before this judge and she will sentence you, but there's a chance that we get probation. So at that point, I was a little bit more inclined to take the plea deal. I still thought that we had a pretty good chance at trial, especially based on how the jury had reacted to the trial. So after the mistrial was declared, my attorney spent several hours just calling the members of the jury to poll them, get their impressions on the case, and their impressions were overwhelmingly favorable to my side. So that had given me cautious optimism for another trial. But then after I got that plea offer, I talked to my mom, talked to some family members and friends, and the one thing that I consistently heard was take the plea deal. Take the plea deal. Be done with it. You might have to serve your time. You might have to do probation. Whatever happens, you'll be done with it. You'll be free. You won't be a convicted felon, and you'll be able to move on with your life. So reluctantly, I did agree to take the plea deal. We were, of course, hoping for probation, but I ended up having the sentencing hearing. We had our character letters ready, and I prepared a statement for the court, a written statement and an oral statement at the hearing, and we were asking for probation. Unfortunately, the judge determined that based on the seriousness of the offense, then namely the fact that there was a firearm involved, that warranted the maximum sentence, which was a year in county jail. So I ended up getting sentenced to a year. And in Nebraska, which is the state where this happened, the way the good time credits work is you basically do 50% of your time plus 2 weeks. So it worked out to about 6.5 months or so. So I ended up getting sentenced immediately after the sentencing hearing. I was taken into custody. So I went to the county jail, got booked and processed. And then from there on out, and I did my 6.5 months.
Well, I want to take a break there because I want to talk about how you handled that as a teenager in a jail, which is, for everybody that knows this show, that's the worst place to be. Prison's better. But before I do that, I want to recognize a lot of people don't like how they show up online. Many individuals think there's no hope when it comes to managing your reputation on Google. Well, there is hope. It's called Discoverability Company, and they can help you. Whether you're building a reputation from scratch or you're repairing search results from a negative news story, Discoverability can also help you how you're portrayed on popular AI services like ChatGPT. To learn more, visit discoverability.co. They're even launching a do-it-yourself SEO option, a course for individuals who want to take their own search results on their own budget and speed. Listeners of Nightmare Success can take $100 off the DIY SEO course with coupon code Nightmare Success. And Nightmare Success podcast is sponsored by the White Collar Support Group, the world's first support group devoted to people navigating the white collar criminal justice system. I'm a member of the White Collar Support Group, and I can tell you that this is a bunch of people who help each other through the criminal justice journey for free. Whether you're just starting your journey or you've made it through to the other side, this is great space for you. You can join us on Zoom Monday, 7 p.m. Eastern Time. For more information, go to prisonist.org. That's prisonist.org. Start here. So, Tyler, you deal with the fact that you've done the plea bargain. You know that you've got a year, and it's going to probably be about 6.5 months. You get booked into jail. Because you did a little bit, like 3 or 4 days. What is your thought that you're going to be in there for months?
So it was surreal. I remember after the judge pronounced the sentence, I was immediately taken into custody. So I was handcuffed. I was walked down a long hallway through the courthouse, and then into, they have like, it's almost like a mini jail pot inside of the courthouse. So I was put in a cell in handcuffs. It's a dark cell. There's really almost no light. The smell is just awful. So I'm in the cell. It's a tiny little cell for what feels like an eternity. It was probably several hours until they had gotten done with the court docket for the day. And then during this time, a couple other people came into neighboring cells, the cells right next to mine. And then the afternoon came. We all got let out of our cells. We were still in handcuffs, and we were put in the back of the jail transport van. So like you see in the movies, the little van with the cages, there's like a cage in the middle, and then between the driver and the back seat. So you have to kind of cram into these little like aisles where there's only like maybe a foot on each side. So it's a cramped ride. The metal is super hot from the sun. And then of course, whenever you're driving, every little bump you hit, you kind of, fall all over the place, bounce all over. So we ended up getting to the jail. You go into this big garage. And then once in the garage, they let you out of the back of the jail transport van. Then you go in through like double doors, like 2 doors after another, into the intake area. And so once you get in there, they do the intake process. You get a jail attire to change into a jail jumpsuit. They fingerprint you. They take your mugshot, ask you for your information, your date of birth, your any allergies or medical concerns you have, any tattoos, any scars, assemble all of that, and then you wait in the intake area until they are ready to bring you back to the housing area. So I waited there for a few hours. Night came. I was finally brought back to the housing area. On the way back, it's a long walk because you go all the way to like the far end of the jail, and that's where the temporary pod is until you get classified and get your permanent assignment. You're in that temporary pod. So, and then during that time, it was during COVID, so you're on 23-hour lockdowns per day. They call it 23 at once. It was actually more like 23 and a half hours on lockdown, and then 30 minutes to come out to use the phones, to use the vending machine, and to shower. Other than that, you're in a cell. It's either a 1-man or 2-man cell that you're locked in 23 and a half hours a day. So I was in there for, I think it was like the first 10 to 12 days of my time in jail was in there. It was miserable. I mean, when I tell you, you don't know what boredom is until you've been on 23.
Solitary. Yeah.
It's, essentially solitary. So just throughout this whole process before, I mean, I'm still, I guess I would say in shock because I just didn't expect to. I mean, I knew it was a chance there was a chance I would have to go back to jail, but you always have in your mind the hope that, it's going to work out right. You're going to get probation. It's going to be a favorable outcome. So I don't really remember having a conscious thought of like what my time in jail was going to be like. More so, it was just like, seemed like forever at that point. I mean, when you're doing 190 days in jail, that really sucks, especially county jail, because like you said, can't really establish a routine there. The conditions are horrible. It's very transient in nature, so people come and go.
I think that's the biggest thing is that you can't, like when you go to prison, you're setting up a life there. You're going to be there. People are also recognizing that they're there, and it's a primitive society, but you learn to live in that society. The jail is, like you said, it's very transient. You have somebody that could be there for a DWI. You could have somebody that just killed his wife. It can be very bloody and violent, and it's a different environment. How did you start working your way into kind of feeling your way around that? Because, I was only in that. I was brought back for a civil trial while I was in prison, and I was there for 6 or 7 days, and I couldn't believe the difference between the prison and the jail. But I'm sure you probably started creating a routine, but like, how did that work for you, Tyler?
Yeah. So as you know, in jails and prisons, there's very there's a lot of unwritten rules. Of course, you get the inmate handbook is what they call it, and then you read over all the rules and the policies and the disciplinary action, like procedures.
Yeah.
So you kind of know what the written rules are, but then there's a whole other set of unwritten rules that are, very prevalent in carceral facilities. So I was fortunate. My first cellmate was super cool guy. He had been around the block some. He had served many years in prison, and was pretty familiar with these unwritten rules. So he kind of took me under his wing, taught me the kind of what you need to do, like how to act, what to not do, what to do.
Mm-hmm.
So that was super helpful. So when I did end up going into my permanent housing assignment, I already kind of knew what to expect. Now, another thing that I think I was fortunate to have is, let me back up. So a lot of times whenever you're new to a housing unit, especially after you've been sentenced, and you get some people who have been there for a little bit of time, a few weeks, a couple months, they kind of start running the pod naturally because they're the ones who have been there the longest. So they have that seniority and they start to earn the respect of the newer guys. So when you come in and you're a new person, they sometimes will try to test you. They'll definitely, you got to ask, they're going to ask you what charges you're there for, and they're going to ask for your paperwork.
Mm-hmm.
So they generally, at least the jail that I was at, they took it pretty seriously to separate people who, had the sex offenses or the sensitive offenses from the gen pop. So that wasn't too much of an issue, though there were sometimes. One issue I would see is if somebody was initially arrested for a sex-related offense, but they pleaded it down to something else that was non-sex related, then those people would sometimes have problems. So all that to say, I was fortunate because my situation, my case had been written about in the newspaper a lot. So they get the newspaper each day, and so they could see, like, one of the common things would be like to see what the criminal cases were, like who was getting sentenced, because each time somebody got sentenced, they would have like what the charges were, how long the sentence was, and who the sentencing judge was. So you would kind of look, especially if they had like a charge that was had been reported on heavily in the media, you would kind of look at that to see like, oh, maybe we'll get so-and-so in our unit. So when I came into the unit, unbeknownst to me at the time, everybody was already familiar with me because my situation had been in the newspaper, and they were surprised at the plea deal because, you go from facing 100 years in prison to now getting sentenced to a year. So I kind of had that respect already, which I think I was fortunate to have because I didn't really have to show out too much or put on a tough face to when I first started interacting with the people. So I think that was something that I was fortunate about. So when I came in, they were pretty, everybody was pretty, welcoming isn't the right word, but I guess welcoming in a jail sense, as in like they kind of explained to you what the pod's rules were. They explained, like, introduced each other, and just let me know that they had kind of a routine. Like they would have a exercise, kind of informal exercise class each evening. They would have time for cards and like TV time where you would watch different channels at different times. So they kind of introduced me to that routine. So to answer your question, there was kind of that routine. It wasn't as much as it would have been had I been in prison, but there was kind of like a mini routine that, of course, depended on who was in the pod. So when those people got moved out or got released, then the routine would kind of change up. But it was definitely helpful to have kind of just some sort of routine that you could rely on to make the days go by faster.
How did you, Tyler, start helping people with their cases? How did that come about?
So great question. We had these little tablets in each of the pods. So you could get the tablet and it had the law library on it. So on the law library, it was like an app. So you could read case law, statutes, all sorts of regulations, constitutions. So I didn't really have anything else to do in jail. And I didn't really play too many card games because that involved gambling and I didn't want to get involved in that. And then at first I was I was definitely very closed off, sort of depressed when I was initially there.
Sure.
So I spent my time studying the law and just because I had actually started with the tablets back when I was on the 23andMes, because that was really the only thing you could do. They didn't have access to any like other apps on the tablet. It was just the law library, and there were a couple others like a Bible and It's like a calculator. I mean, who's going to need a calculator when you're in jail, you know? But so the only app that really got my interest was the law library app. So I had already been familiar with it. So when I got to my permanent location, I started just spending my time on the tablet, and people saw it and then would ask me what I'm doing, and I would say, "Oh, I'm just reading cases. I'm reading the cases that came out today." I probably sounded like a giant nerd, um, but there's worse things to be in jail.
Sure.
They had like a library that you could check books out from. So I got a bunch of like law books, like books about the rules of evidence and the rules of criminal procedure and the federal rules of criminal procedure, all these different books. So I would have them stacked up right next to my bunk. Um, and I would spend my days reading through those books, taking notes, reading the case law. And so eventually people just started coming up to me, and after they knew what I was doing, said, "Hey, I've got this issue. Can you look into it for me?" And I would say, "Sure." Like I was happy to help them, you know, give me something to do. And I always enjoyed helping other people. So I would look into their cases, and eventually kind of I became kind of the go-to person for people with criminal, like questions about their criminal cases.
Which isn't a bad thing, by the way, to have. There's a certain amount of respect in prison and jails if you can help somebody. You know, that goes a long ways, especially if you're able to help somebody with their case, and you really are able to help them.
Most definitely, yeah, because I know a lot of jailhouse lawyers, they will say whatever the person wants to hear and take their money, take their commissary, and kind of be done with it. For me, I didn't charge at all. It wasn't something that I even thought about charging. I mean, I would have people, you know, say, "Hey, thanks for helping me out. Take this," and then just like as a gift. But I was never really one to try to charge people. I mean, I enjoyed learning about the law and helping people, and I understood the problems with the criminal legal system, the problems with access to legal counsel, the difficulties communicating with their defense attorneys. So I was happy to help in any way I could. So eventually, whenever I started helping some people, and then it became sort of almost a full-time job in jail. I would have people lined up one after the other, just waiting. And we had this little like desk area that had previously been like where the CO would sit to monitor the unit. Yeah. But then after due to staffing issues, understaffing, they stopped having a CO station there permanently. So the CO would come every 30 minutes and do their round to make sure that everything was quote unquote okay. So I kind of set up at that desk, and I would have people, you know, just come up to me. They would pull up a chair. We'd go over their paperwork. I would pull up the statutes that they were charged under on the iPad or on the tablet, and then just walk them through their cases and help them prepare for their sentencing hearings, getting character letters, writing allocutions. That's like the statements to the court. And so it became a pretty helped pass the time. I helped a lot of people, and I really enjoyed it. And that was kind of my first interaction with like firsthand interaction with people involved in the legal system. And I really enjoyed it. I also, a lot of people that I noticed in jail didn't really have any sort of idea of their rights. They didn't know the First Amendment, the Second, Fourth, Fifth, Sixth, Eighth, all these 14th, the important amendments. And so eventually they started asking me to teach legal, like know your rights classes, which I really enjoyed doing. So I would do those classes. We would have the classes informally as a pod where I would go over different cases, like precedential cases, go over important amendments, laws, clear up any misconceptions about the legal system. And so that was kind of the other aspect of the jailhouse lawyering. So I really enjoyed it.
I mean, and that really had to have eaten up a lot of time. You know, that the way that you did your time, you were busy, and you were doing something that was helping people, but it was also educating you. You know, it's funny that Shawshank Redemption, there's a scene in Shawshank Redemption where he's helping them do their taxes and investments and everything. He gets so busy with that, he's got Red helping him, and they're going through all the paperwork and everything. But I can just see you sitting at that desk that the CEO is supposed to be at, and you're just having everybody in line helping out. So, Tyler, you get towards the end of this thing. What are you thinking on getting released? Like, what's your thought process of like, I'm going to walk out of here?
So unfortunately, it wasn't all smooth sailing through the beginning. So I started as a jailhouse lawyer, and I did that throughout the time. But about halfway through, as a pod, we had filed a complaint against one of the COs because she was very verbally abusive. just always like trying to start confrontations, would get right in people's faces and
Mm.
almost goad them into, swinging on her. So as a pod, we filed a complaint against her, and I was the main one behind it. I was the one who drafted it, and then we had other people who signed on to it. And then, so after we submit that, a couple days after we submit that complaint, I have some COs come into the pod. They tell me, pack my stuff, I'm moving to a different pod. No explanation why. The crazy thing is I had just had my disciplinary review earlier that day. So the disciplinary review is where they go over any infractions you've had, any issues that you've had that could be concerning, and that affects your point score, and your point score dictates what level of security you are. So when I went in, I was low security. After I got classified, I was low security because I didn't have a record at that time. Before then, I mean, so I had that disciplinary review. My score had actually gone down because I had not gotten in trouble at all while incarcerated. So literally later that same day, they come in, tell me to pack my stuff, and they said my behavior has been unacceptable. So they moved me to another pod down the hallway, and it's a pod that is much rougher. You have some very interesting characters in there, to put it nicely, and it's a lot more restrictive than the other pod too, because I had trustee status, so I could help out around the jail, mow the grass outside, help clean the hallways, and sweep up and move like furniture from like the administrative office areas. So that helped pass the time, and you got paid $30 a week for that, which in jail was pretty good. That was the highest paying job in the jail. So I ended up getting moved to that other pod, lost my trustee status, never got any sort of explanation other than my behavior was unacceptable. So, I mean, the only thing I can think of is that it was due to my work as a jailhouse lawyer and filing that complaint against the CO.
Yeah.
But I eventually settled into the new pod. And then while I was in that pod, I made some friends, really hit it off with some people, and continued my jailhouse lawyering work. Then, unfortunately, while I was in that pod, I ended up having to, after that, spending some time in solitary because they had left a door open so the pod connects to the little like outside area where you have like a little recreation area. It's an enclosed area. You have like concrete walls and then like a cage at the very top. So you can kind of see out like the sunlight and get a little bit of fresh air, but it's mostly just like a concrete room with the like chain link fence as a ceiling. So we had been out there.
Coming after you outside there, Tyler, from outside your window. Hearing the sirens.
Yeah. So yeah, you could definitely, you hear like some like birds and sirens and sometimes like loud vehicular traffic. So it was kind of like the most like, I guess, normal place where you could actually experience the world. But you never actually got to go outside like in the like freestanding, like it was all never like, that wasn't even a freestanding structure. It was just connected to the pod. So you would, that was the most that you could go outside. But there was one night where they had, it was after dark, so you were supposed to be inside because they would shut it down after a certain time. And normally they would lock the door. So it was like one of those big, metal jail doors that would lock, and there was no getting outside after they locked it. One night they had turned the lights off out there, but they had kept it, they had not locked it. So me and a couple of my friends, we went outside there, and we were kind of just like play fighting. It was just like shadow boxing, basically is what they called it. So they ended up seeing on the cameras there, I guess the COs saw us shadow boxing. And then next thing we know, a bunch of COs come running into the pod. There's about probably half a dozen of them. They handcuff us, take us up to solitary, and claim that we were fighting each other. And they tried to get the police involved and have the police come, and they were asking like, will you agree to cooperate with the police and press charges on each other? We saw, and we were all separated at this time. We came we're in the same pod later on. But when we were talking, we were like all had the same story, that they were trying to get us to press charges against each other. When we all said multiple times, we were adamant that we were just like play fighting. It was shadow boxing. On the video, like I'm sure they could see it. That's what we were telling the CEOs. So long story short, we spent some time in solitary. Finally, the sergeant comes and he talks to us, and he says that he's reviewed the video and he could see that we weren't like actually fighting. It was just play fighting, shadow boxing. And then he ended up saying that because we caused a scene though, and they had to spend that time to come get us out of there, that we had to spend some time in solitary. So we spent about a week in solitary for that. Then after that, we got moved to a medium security unit. So we were in the low security, the minimum security, but then we get moved to the medium security. So you're in there with all kinds of people, with child abuse charges, sexual assault charges, armed robbery, homicide charges.
You get the full meal deal, Tyler.
Exactly. So yeah, you get an interesting, very, very interesting characters. There's interesting characters everywhere in jail, but especially in that medium security pod. And actually, I forgot. No, that was actually high security, because the first one we were in while we were just waiting to get classified, that was medium security. This one was high security. And you went to
high. Okay.
So yeah, we were in high security, and then we were in there for probably 2 to 3 weeks, maybe 4 weeks. We stayed out of trouble. Then we were able to work our way back downstairs to minimum security, but we were still separated at that point. They put us in different minimum security pods. Mm-hmm. So then fast forward to that part, I'm coming up on my release. Once I got back into that minimum security pod, I made some more friends. Some of the people who I had known before were still there. So mm-hmm. I was able to make some friends, continue my jailhouse lawyering work, since I was not going to be dissuaded by the retaliation I had received. It would take a lot more than that to prevent me from doing that. So I was able to kind of settle back into a routine. And then as the release date approaches, once you get to the end, and you can probably confirm, but once you get to the end of your sentence, time drags by. I mean, it's every day.
Like you're molasses.
Yes, it feels like, a week is like a day will go by and that feels like it's been a week. And you look up, it's only been 5 hours. So it drags on and on and on. And then something that I was kind of surprised about was towards the end of the time in jail, I started getting pretty nervous, like about release, about reintegrating. And although
which is normal.
Exactly. That was, something that I knew people who had come from prison were experiencing. But even with me having spent about 6.5 months incarcerated, it was something I started feeling too, like just having to readjust to the outside, reconnect with the people who you've been away from, and go back to your job, get all your affairs in order. So I did get kind of nervous about that, but I talked to some of the OGs, as we called them, people who had been around the block a time or two, just about what to expect. And I was pretty excited, a little bit nervous still, but I was pretty excited about getting out and getting on with my life. And I was confident that that experience wasn't something that I ever wanted to return to. So I was going to do everything in my power to lead a law-abiding life, stay away from negative influences, and stay on the straight and narrow. So eventually I was released. My mom had come and gotten me. I got out. We went to a pizza place. They had a local pizza place. It was a chain place, but common in the Midwest, Casey's, you might be familiar with. So we got some pizza from Casey's, and I remember something that was surprising. I was looking forward to that for months. I started eating it, and I felt sick. I couldn't hardly eat it. And that was the case for a couple of weeks. I couldn't eat normal food. So in jail, you're on at least in the jail I was at, you're on a soy-based diet. So all the food, it's a bunch of carbs and really stuff that you're not even really sure what it is. I hear the prison food is bad. I think the jail food, from what I have heard, is even worse.
Jail food's worse. Jail food's worse.
That's kind of the general consensus. So just getting out, like eating normal food, literally made me physically ill. So it did take a little while to readjust, but eventually I was able to readjust and start enjoying normal food again, and kind of reintegrate into society and move on with my life.
Wow. So how soon was it, Tyler, that when you got out that you decided that you were going to go in? You went to the University of Memphis. Was that just an immediate thing that you jumped into, and you knew that you wanted to get into law because you had read so much and done so much while you were in? Was that what your thinking was at that time?
Yeah, so great question. So actually, when I had been arrested initially, I had been in college at that time. It was during COVID, so all of my classes were
okay. So you were at home online. Okay.
I was in Nebraska. So I'm from Chattanooga, Tennessee. I was in Nebraska at the time because I moved out there for a job opportunity. So I was out there. I had been out there only about 2 months when the incident happened. So then I ended up getting arrested, going to jail. Fortunately, it was during our Thanksgiving break, so I didn't
I missed a little bit of class, but I was able to recover pretty quickly since we did not. It was kind of exam prep time, so I didn't really miss too much of class, so I was able to jump in and continue pretty quickly.
Okay.
Then while my case was pending, I actually went to work first intern for a criminal defense attorney in Chattanooga. At that point, I had no prior knowledge of the legal system, didn't know what to expect, and I wanted to have that knowledge of what to expect so that I could help with my own case and would be a little bit less nervous and know what to.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So I actually started interning with her. It was through the school, the University of Memphis, through like academic. They have like an externship course, so you could get course credit for the internship. So I started interning with this criminal defense attorney. Really, really enjoyed it. Really enjoyed the legal work and the client interaction. And actually, when the internship ended, she offered me to stay on as her paralegal / investigator. It was a solo firm. She was the only attorney there, and then she had one other legal assistant. So working in a small firm like that, I got to do a little bit of everything. I was the receptionist, the legal assistant, the paralegal.
Great education.
Exactly. She did juvenile court, state court, and federal court work, all kinds of ranging from, simple possession of marijuana to homicides and white collar Ponzi schemes that, involved millions of dollars. So I kind of got all kinds of different exposure, which was super helpful. So, and she knew about my experience, my arrest and involvement in the legal system. It was something I was upfront about. And I think one of the reasons why she hired me on is because she really valued that experience. It was something that was really helpful with clients because, you've been
on the other side. Yeah,
exactly. If they know that you've been through it, then they're more likely to trust you. So we had that trust developed. So I was able to work with her for a couple years. Then I ended up, and during this time, I was thinking about maybe going into the legal field, but I didn't know if it was really something for me. All the attorneys I knew were super smart, super well accomplished. It seemed like something that I couldn't really compare. So I didn't know if that was really for me. I ended up taking the law school admissions test during the summer while I was working with her. And just as something that maybe I would want to go to law school one day. Your scores are good for 5 years, so maybe it's something I would go back to later on. But I ended up going to jail. Actually, let me back up. So the week that I graduated, the week I got sentenced, I also graduated. So I graduated from college. A few days later, I ended up getting sentenced. So the timing worked out nicely. We were able to put the sentencing hearing out long enough to allow me to graduate. But then we had the sentencing hearing. I got sentenced. I got out in November. And at that point, based on my experience in jail and I spent a lot of time, reading about influential attorneys and civil rights activists and social justice advocates during this time. So when I got out, it was that gave me the inspiration to pursue a career in the legal field. So I got out on November 13th. On November 14th, I submitted my application to law school. Stayed up all night getting my application materials ready, filling out the application, writing my personal statement, which was about my experience in the legal system and being incarcerated. So I ended up applying to the University of Memphis that following day. And then the following month, I received my acceptance letter into the University of Memphis School of Law. Then the month after that, I received my scholarship offer, which is for full tuition. So I was shocked. I was shocked to even get into it.
I'm curious because did you get any blowback from having a record, or was it? Did you have to fill that out on the application form, explain it, and all those different things that would go with that?
Absolutely. So you have to disclose pretty much everything, and I knew that would be possibly a hindrance or at least a barrier to overcome. So I applied widely to a lot of law schools, got rejected from a lot of law schools. They don't give you the reason why, but from a lot of the law schools, my application, like my hard skills, my qualifications were very
would have
good.
Been there, right?
Yeah, they have to release all the GPA scores, or the GPA ranges, the LSAT scores, so you can kind of see and compare. And when you're above the 75th percentile on both of those metrics, and then you don't have anything, you have like the work experience and other solid qualifications, but then you're getting rejected. The reasonable inference is then it's because of the criminal record, which I understand. It was something that I wasn't surprised about. I knew that it was going to be an uphill battle. So I applied widely to all different kinds of law schools, and then got into a couple other ones. So Memphis was the one I ended up choosing. I also got into CUNY, City University of New York in New York City. That one I didn't get a scholarship offer from. And then I also got into Georgia State in Atlanta. I didn't get a scholarship offer from there. I got into University of Cincinnati. I got a 50% scholarship there, and then the full tuition scholarship from Memphis, which kind of sold me on Memphis. And I mean, I had gone there for undergrad.
Really sold you on Memphis. It'll be a Memphis Tiger.
Yeah. So yeah, that was like, I knew then financially I wasn't going to be able to shell out a lot of money for law school, even with loans and everything. So Memphis just seemed like the great option. So I ended up committing there, and that's where I'm at now.
Well, I'm curious, Tyler, because you're in your first year there. Does it come up? With your schoolmates, law school students, does your situation come up? I mean, because you're sitting in classes sometimes where you've experienced what the class is talking about.
Absolutely. So law students are nosy people. They'll, if there's stuff out there, they'll find it. So I went in with the mindset of being completely open about it, not just because of that, but because I believe that lived experience is a unique asset in every field, but especially the legal field.
Right.
So I was open about it from the very beginning. During orientation, when we were introducing ourselves, we would explain why we wanted to go to law school. And so I flat out said, I'm formerly incarcerated. My experience in jail opened my eyes to the problems with the criminal legal system, and I'm here to, hopefully advocate to fix some of those issues. And what I noticed is people were overwhelmingly receptive to my background, at least to my face. I mean, I talked to a lot of people about.
Here's one thing I think, Tyler, is that what you just said there is something that I so wholeheartedly believe is that the way that you did it, you explained why you were there. You explained why your experience created the passion that you have for law. That also means that you own the story at that point. They don't own it. They can't say, hey, I heard about you. No, you've presented it. You've told why it happened, why you have chosen the path that you've chosen. But now you own the story. Nobody can bring it up against you that say, hey, you were hiding this or you were doing that or that. No, you stood out in front of it. And I think that there's some, when you take ownership of it and you own the story, there's a freedom that comes with that is different than trying to think, well, I walk into this room, does anybody know about my situation? Totally different. And I think it allows you to expand on opportunities better.
Most definitely. And that's a great point too. And I should have mentioned that, like my whole mindset, even outside of the legal field, just in general, like other unrelated employment opportunities and for housing, like whenever I'm applying for an apartment, I'm always, very transparent about my record. I explain what I've learned from it, and I'm remorseful for my actions, but I don't regret going through that experience because I think it's made me a better person. And eventually when I become an attorney, I'll be a better attorney because of it. So I've always been super open about it. And I've also been very pleasantly surprised about people who you would not think have been involved with the legal system or have had any legal trouble will open up to you confidentially and say, like, oh yeah, I was involved in this back when I was a teenager. Oh yeah, my brother is incarcerated. Like people you would not even think, like I'm talking lawyers, judges, all kinds of people. So that has really been a unique experience.
Do you think that Gen Z, your generation, has any different type of way that or opinions of how they look at the criminal legal system?
Most definitely. So my generation grew up in the time of the murders of Trayvon Martin and Michael Brown and Breonna Taylor and George Floyd. So there was really an emphasis on policing and police accountability during the mid to late 2010s and the continuing now into the 2020s. So that already kind of shifted people's perspective on policing and that aspect of the criminal legal system. And then you get there's been, shows that have come out, podcasts, books, and especially on social media, people talking about the problems with the criminal legal system, the inherent racism and classism and the power that prosecutors have and how the laws are stacked against defendants. So I think that there is definitely a different perception of the criminal legal system from the perspective of Gen Z compared to older generations. So that is something that I've noticed too. Even just people like kind of going off my previous point about people who you wouldn't expect to have involvement in the legal system, even people who you would not expect to necessarily have opinions of the legal system, certainly not negative opinions of the legal system. When you start opening up with them and sharing your personal experience, then they're surprisingly receptive to it. Even people who come from, typical like law and order, police backgrounds, prosecution backgrounds, they're pretty receptive to what you're saying and kind of understand the issues that you're bringing up. So I've been very pleasantly surprised by that as well.
Yeah, that's interesting. That's interesting. So what are you thinking? I mean, you got 2 more years of law school. Is it criminal defense law you're going to go focus, and that's going to be your passion going forward, I would assume?
So definitely, I plan to start with criminal defense, do that for at least a few years. I would like to do public defense, get a lot of good trial experience, represent people who really could use adequate legal representation. And then I might do that long term, or I might transition into an impact litigation role. So something like the ACLU, the MacArthur Justice Center, Southern Poverty Law, those nonprofits that handle civil rights cases and systemic issues in the criminal legal system.
I'm curious about the board that you sit on. That's the Formerly Incarcerated College Graduates Network. I'm assuming that those are people that have gone to college that were formerly incarcerated, and is it a national organization, a local organization, and what does it? Is it shared experiences that people are together, or do they have something that they're trying to do statutorily, change laws? What's the what goes on there?
So FICGN, for short, is a national network of people who are formerly incarcerated or otherwise system impacted, who are or have pursued higher education. Okay. So we've got at least a few thousand members nationwide, and actually in other countries as well. So our memberships include college professors, attorneys, executive directors, elected officials, people of various walks of life, various backgrounds. And so our mission is to promote the education and empowerment of formerly incarcerated individuals. So that's our mission statement.
Okay, I love that.
To expand educational and employment opportunities for people with criminal records. We do this through various programs, various educational programs, career prep programs. We offer scholarships for people pursuing certain programs. And we do some policy work with legislation to like in terms of ban the box, restricting the use of a person's criminal record in education and housing and employment opportunities, and just other legislative stuff, clean slate laws, so that people can get their records cleaned after they've served their time and have shown that they're rehabilitated. So our mission basically boils down to just helping formerly incarcerated people pursue opportunities in life.
I like that. I mean, and it's important, banding together, you have a stronger, impactful voice that can get more done. So I had not heard of it, but I'm really glad it's there. I'm wondering, this whole thing that's happened with you, it's such a, it's a moment and it's a time. You took care of things. You moved forward. You're doing good things now. What do you think is your biggest takeaway through all this you experienced?
I would say the biggest takeaway is probably that just to remain resilient. People are going to encounter obstacles. There's going to be hardships. But I think it's really important to keep your head down, keep your chest up, and keep pushing forward. I used to be very, very negative and, kind of I guess, have a lot of self-pity for difficult situations, even though I tried not to. It's kind of, I think it's natural to kind of fall into that trap. And I found myself doing that for when I was a teenager. But then after this experience, I've seen kind of how it opened doors that I didn't think possible. And a lot of the opportunities I've had since then have occurred not in spite of my experience, but because of it.
Because of it.
Exactly. It's given me that unique perspective. It's put me on a completely different career path and life path. And so when all the stars align like that and you find your calling in life, I think that's really, really passionate. And there's no amount of, money or other resources that can really replace that kind of internal fulfillment.
Yeah, I love it. And, you're an inspiring young guy, and I can't wait to see what all you do, Tyler, because you don't seem to be afraid to go ahead and step into something that maybe you don't even know, but you're going to get this answers and get a solution and keep stepping with it. And that's how you get to where you want to go. And I applaud that. Speaking of gratitude, I want to give a shout out to Homestead Financial Home Mortgage. They let me use all the fancy cameras and lights here. And if you've got home mortgage need, Greg Aftiev is your guy. He knows everything about the mortgage business. And if you want to know more about what I'm doing, go to BrentCassity.com. I spell it wrong. Spell it with a T-Y, not a D-Y. And as I always used to say, oh, by the way, get my book. Primary Success. Primary Success. It's on Amazon, Barnes & Noble. Check it out. It's my story. And as I used to say when I was writing my emails back and forth from Leavenworth, stay strong. I'll do the same. Tyler Foster, thanks so much for being here today. I think you gave some nuggets of wisdom away as a young man, and I appreciate that.
Well, I really appreciate it. Thank you for having me.
Nightmare Success, in and out.